At finehomebuilding.com, we've taken our 40 years of experience publishing an expert-written magazine for architects, designers, builders, remodelers, and do-it-yourselfers, and used it to build the best online membership available to anyone interested in high-quality, high-performance homes. With an all-access membership, you can read 40 years of FHB print issues, watch hundreds of in-depth how-to videos, follow the annual FHB house build, plan your next project with our new project guides, and much more. Visit finehomebuilding.com to sign up for All Access, the most important tool in your toolbox.
They just shoved insulation, fiberglass in there, and the sheathing was like a fiberboard. And in those places that had high humidity in the winter, that fiberboard was just like, you'd pull back that insulation and you could scoop that stuff out like oatmeal. It was just rotten.
Man, that's scary. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Senior Editor Mark Peterson.
Hello there.
Green Building Advisor Senior Editor Kylie Jacques.
Hello.
And our amazing producer Jeff Rose.
Hey there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it was a pleasure to see you all. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks.
Mark, I've been dying to know what's going on with your house. So you had this long holiday weekend. I'm assuming it's all framed.
Yeah, right. That holiday weekend, my son actually was in town for the week, so we did a lot of playing and very little work. But the good news is my trusses got dropped off, and the better news is the framers are coming out tomorrow. So which is good because I don't know when's the last time you framed anything besides like a partition wall, but it's amazing how many things you forget over the years.
Oh,
It's just, and things that you knew, but you're laying out a wall. It's like, oh, that's right. I should have started from over here instead of over there. I ended up, with a bad seam right here. And it just, I had a lot of fun, but I'm really glad the professionals are coming over to take it over before I really do something that I can't fix.
Are you going to have time to be involved there? I mean,
so my routine is probably meet with them. Yeah, meet with them in the morning, and I'm right across the street, so I'll probably meet with them in the morning and then meet with them in the afternoon and just let them do their things. From the people I've talked to around here, I've got a really good guy. He was recommended from the lumber yard, and I've met some other subs that said he's as good as it gets. So
that's what you want.
I'm going to try to wrangle him into a truss story here coming up.
Oh, great! That's something we have not done enough.
Yeah, so whether it's on this house or another house that he's working on, we'll see what happens. But he seems like he's interested.
Well, I wish you great success with that. Kylie, what's going on with your place? You working on your basement air sealing like we talked about?
No, not yet. I mentioned that I didn't get into that yet. I've been dealing with my well, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I thought I would give a little GBA update because there's a couple of projects happening that will affect the content. And I just... it's an opportunity to share it, to get people interested. We're launching a new program called the Expert Exchange, and the first...
It's got a great name. Let's say that.
Thank you. I came up
what's
with
it about?
So it's a 4-part series, for lack of a better word. It'll run quarterly. So starting in January, running through March, we're going to be covering the topic of getting to net zero. So featuring projects that are net zero and how they got there, all of the strategies, and we'll be speaking with the experts who designed it and executed those projects. And at the end, we will have a webinar with them as panelists to talk about all of the content that they shared with us. And we'll have a little, GBA is well loved for the Q&A forum and the community there. And the idea is to get them talking very specifically about this content. So we'll see how it goes. I like the idea of it. I'm looking forward to launching it. Brian Pontilillo will be working with me on it, which I'm very happy about. And the other thing that we're working on is the detail library, which is another facet of GBA that people really enjoy. But it's getting old, not the details
We
so
should tell
much.
folks, Kylie, what the detail library is.
Right. It's over 1,000 construction detail drawings. So the
With an emphasis on best practice and energy efficient design, right?
That's right. But the write-ups that go along with those details are not the best. So we are revisiting those, rewriting those, giving them a good tech read, and presenting them more like articles. So there's a lot of redundancy with the details, so we're going to consolidate a lot of. Anyway, the user experience should be improved, greatly improved. And those are all downloadable details, which I know people appreciate because they can bring them to the field.
Yeah, well, and they can integrate them into their own designs, right? If you have the detail, then you can say, do it this way.
Yeah. So
Kylie,
I'm excited about those 2 projects.
You're doing a fantastic job over there, by the way. I just want to say, because
Mark.
half of what I do all day long is research. I'm looking up I'm looking up something, and it's amazing how many times that at the top of the page is a green building advisor.
Ooh, that's good. My search engine optimization strategies are working.
And that's the thing. You can put. And my guess is, and most of the time, it's content that I use, or it's useful.
And reliable. That's what I want to say.
Yeah.
Is like there's so much garbage out there. The things that you see on GBA, you can trust.
Well, that's all thanks to our experts.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because you can make crappy content rise to the top just with some SEO magic. Yeah. And I don't think that's what's happening here. I think it's good content, and people are going there and coming back again, and it shows. So good job over there.
That's nice to hear. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do.
Okay, so on to the well. Enough of this dilly-dallying.
Well, somebody asked about the well in one of the questions, so let's leave it for there. What, don't you think?
Yeah, we're going to talk about it in the question.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have any kind words about GBA or boosting Kylie's morale in any other manner?
Not necessary. What have you been working on?
I haven't been working on anything. I've been away.
He's been wrapping Christmas presents. He's done his shopping. It's all.
He's been producing podcasts left and right. That's what.
Yeah, that's true. What was it? 3 in 2 days, Jeff, or was it more than that?
Yeah. So this is 4 so far this week. It's Wednesday.
You must get sick of hearing us talk, Jeff.
No, he doesn't. He loves it.
So when you visited your brother, did he put you to work on his house at all?
No, his house is pretty tight right now because he just had a major remodel done, probably shortly before the lockdown. So he had a whole kitchen wing redone. He lives in an old farmhouse. So, and they took it down to the ground. That part.
The whole
of it.
thing?
No, just that part of it.
That section. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have they had snow yet, Jeff?
Yeah. They have. When we were up there, they had a couple of inches, but not a whole lot.
Jealous.
Patrick, do you ever get asked to work on people's house when you come and visit them?
Oh my God, my mom is
this
the
on
worst,
your mind, Mark?
I was just, I was just thinking about it. Actually, I don't mind it. I kind of like it. I'd rather do something unless it's like insulating an attic or something. But sitting around eating cake and getting fatter.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, I do, of course. I think anyone who's a tradesperson gets roped into family projects, right? That's just the way it goes. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about, I've been working on my project, and the big task yesterday was just spending a ton of money, so I was very successful with that. $1,000, well, actually $1,100 between stair risers, stair treads, skirt boards, and nosing for the winders. So
that's so expensive.
Patrick, do you think you would have spent that same amount 2 years ago? In other words,
has the stuff gone up?
Yeah.
Well, so here's a question for readers. So I had to buy listeners. I had to buy 20 square feet of 2 1/4 inch select oak strip flooring, which is like, as white bread hardwood flooring as you could possibly get. And it was $580 a square foot, which seemed not crazy, but definitely more than I remember. What do you think, Mark?
That doesn't sound bad.
Yeah, I don't think it sounds bad.
No.
Mark, I wonder, because your location, you're not in the Northeast, which is so refreshing. Do you think that materials are less expensive where you are versus coasts?
No, they're not.
No.
I've checked, because sometimes I see...
How about bourbon?
And bourbon is surprisingly is cheaper here. When my son was in town, we went to Buffalo Trace Tour, and Yeah, they're doubling the size of their capacity, literally doubling the size of the capacity because you can't find the stuff. So people.
Well, there's
people
nothing else to do during COVID time, so people just sit around drinking bourbon.
There's a lot of drinking going on. Right.
So the stair treads were 5/4 thick, 11.5 by 42 inches wide, and they were $29.25 each. And that was less than the 3/4 inch crappy ones they had at the home center. So I thought that was really a square deal.
Where did you get them?
PC Hardwood in Danbury, which is strictly a hardwood flooring dealer, and the service is fantastic. I was out of there in 20 minutes.
It's refreshing.
It's so nice when you go to the place that people who know what they're doing go to.
Although it's always a hard ride back from picking up those kind of materials. If you're coming back with a trailer load of wood and it's a big giant bulk thing of wood and you spend $1,000, that feels normal. But you coming back, you spend $1,000 and like everything can fit into your trunk. It's like, God, it's not quite as satisfying.
That's a good point.
The other thing I want to briefly talk about is, this is my current reading list. You guys, can you see that? It's backwards, I bet, or maybe not.
No.
Hot connections. What's the other one? Move your old wiring.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
tell. Where my
some
head
light
is
reading.
at.
Wait a minute. You go from stairs to wiring. What are you doing?
I am fascinated by electrical work, you may know. And we had David Shapiro on the Pro Talk podcast, and he wrote Your Old Wiring. And it was so interesting, I just had to get a copy. And then he told me about Jesse Ehrenstein's book, Hot Connections, which is about the tragedy of aluminum wiring and the efforts of the industry to tamp down the investigation into problems. They just were clearly trying to cover their butts, and a bunch of people died because of these fires. So it's a sordid tale. It really is. It's like it would make a good screenplay.
The wiring themselves is fine. It's just wherever they make a connection point.
Yeah, they start to arc and cause fires, and they don't trip breakers because it's not an overcurrent situation. It's it's an arc situation.
And to fix them, I don't know if you've ever. I did a story on this for a while ago, and those little connectors, I think they're like wrapped in silicone or something. They kind of bury the connections in silicone or something like that. They're really specific to reconnecting, safely connecting aluminum wires, and those little buggers are expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, if you multiply that by 100 of them, it's not a cheap fix.
It is not a cheap fix, and there's a lot of this stuff out there. I did not realize how much of it went into homes.
Good for
Yeah,
you.
it was like a decade long, right? Or maybe even less than a decade, but they did a lot of homes in that decade.
I'll let you know how it turns out.
I enjoy wiring.
Yeah, you do too?
I love the
too.
thrill of flipping that switch on and flipping that breaker back on and have everything work the way it's supposed to.
I think a lot of people are intimidated by wiring. Wouldn't you agree?
It makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know. I have an intuitive sense to it, and maybe it comes from like model railroading as a kid or whatever, but that was one of the first projects I was able to legitimately help my father with as a youngster. I may have been 12 or 14 years old, and they were my brother and he were trying to figure out how to wire a switch, and I was just like, "Oh, you do this, this, and this," and they were like, "How do you know this?"
My last house, the homeowner obviously did the wiring in my last house because I think I had 4 or 5 three-way switches, and not one of them worked properly.
Oh, that's so irritating.
You would have to have one switch on in one room.
Yeah,
this one would
I
have to
have
be in this position in order for
I
this
have
one
that
to work.
situation, and it's never in the right position when it's pitch,
No.
pitch black, and you're like, why isn't it?
Yep.
That's
over there
often
to
easy
do
to
this.
fix, Kylie. You should just
Is it?
tear into there. Yeah, just
And the
taking
guy
stuff
used
apart.
he thought it would be better to use 12-gauge wire on everything for some reason. It's like,
Wow, it's
what?
so hard on your fingers.
God, it's the worst, especially
It's
when you
the
cram
worst.
a box full of wires.
Oh yeah. Well, we better get to it. Oh my
nerding
goodness,
out.
this is a busy show. We got a lot going on.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
okay.
Go right to it. All right, here we go. This comes from John. Hey, podcast. I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and recently was listening to 378. I got quite a laugh out of your discussion of condensation on windows. I should back up a little, though. I'm an amateur DIYer that lives in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I'm also an engineer. You know, it drives my family nuts that I'm constantly experimenting on things around the house, Little do they know. And I love the podcast. Back to your comments on condensation on windows. My laugh came when you guys proceeded to indicate that double pane windows were all you really needed to keep condensation at bay. And if you still had condensation issues, it was probably because of a wet basement, and you should solve that issue first. The reason it made me chuckle was because that morning I opened the blinds in our bedroom and noticed some condensation starting in the corners of our double pane windows and thought to myself, better check the setting on the furnace humidifier. Our nighttime lows are getting into the 20 degree Fahrenheit range, 5 Celsius, so it really isn't that cold yet. And our basement is definitely not a source of moisture. In fact, I'm sitting down here now, working away in my office, and the hygrometer on my little thermometer says that on my desk says I currently have 38% relative humidity in the basement. And it hasn't strayed much beyond 40% since I started working down here in September. Anyway, I guess my point is that not all double pane windows are adequate to keep moisture off of them. I'll chase condensation levels with our humidifier set point based on outdoor temps all winter long. Otherwise, they'll ice up in really cold temperatures when I close the curtains or blinds. And not all basements are a constant source of moisture. Keep up the good work, John. Well, John, my windows get condensation on them too from our insulated Roman shades that my wife made. So yeah, of course, if there's no room airflow getting to the window, it's going to be way colder than the ambient temperature. And yeah, it's going to get condensation on it, right?
I have an interesting little tidbit because it just so happens that this morning's GBA post from Randy Williams, who's a builder in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, mentioned that in cold climates, the windows can act as dehumidifiers during the heating season, which I hadn't really thought of it that way before, and that the window glass can be cold enough, of course, to condense water out of the air during periods of elevated humidity, and he has seen this on triple pane windows too. So
sure.
I thought it was a timely comment.
I had my starter home that we built. It was just a little, nothing fancy, but they were brand new windows, double pane, and they got in the winter. They had a quarter inch of ice on the corners of them.
Oh,
it was just
terrible.
sheets of
And
it.
why do people live there again?
It took me many years to figure out that it was a bad. It was a better idea to move, but yeah. So it double pane, brand new double panes. When it gets that darn cold, they won't. You will get frost on them. Period.
I want to say one note of caution: if you have condensation on your windows, you better make sure that your combustion appliances are all venting correctly, because that can be a huge source of moisture, and you won't otherwise know it. And I know this from experience in my parents' house when our gas furnace flue was obstructed at one point from bird's nest. All the windows fogged up and got water all over them. And it took a while to figure out what the heck was going on, right? Because people didn't have CO detectors in that period, and that might explain some things to y'all. Anyway.
So I should probably be closing the damper on my wood stove after every fire, which I do not do.
Well, you got to make sure it's really out, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yep.
Hey, can I mention something? Because I had never heard this term before, and forgive me if it's just a novice not knowing, but furnace humidifier. I had to look that up because I'd never seen those two words together. And for anybody else who didn't know, it's a whole house dehumidifier is what I've gathered. And
Humidifier, yeah.
Humidifier, excuse me. So
Yeah.
it connects with the forced air HVAC system to moisten the air that the furnace is pushing through the house.
Bad idea. Almost universally.
I agree. I mean, it's funny because we've gone into houses and people complain about ice on their windows, and then they got the humidifier running, full blast on their furnace. It's like,
and they are notoriously gross inside there too, right?
A lot of mold and
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
For ice on the windows, what worked for us the best was just to turn the fan on. I mean, when it got below 10 degrees out, which was quite often in the winter, just running the fan nonstop helped a lot. And yeah, when you close the blinds, it does get worse.
This comes from Jason in Maine. I recently listened to the Keep Craft Alive number 7 podcast with Aaron Augusto. The topic of conversation went to the trade gap issue, and some of the issues touched on were a lack of pay and a lack of training. That is a huge issue as well in my location in Maine. I'm a 33-year-old business owner, and I have 7 employees, all carpenters that work for me and range in age from 17 to 56. I've been able to build a solid team by providing good pay, a variety of work, and the willingness to train. However, it is nearly impossible to find anyone younger with formal training. They've dropped the carpentry programs at the local community college, and the shop classes have moved to computer courses. To continue to grow a business and bring up younger people in the trades, I think it's important to take the time to train, educate, and demonstrate that you can make a nice career within the industry. I have found, and probably to no fault of their own, very few high school age or slightly older individuals that are interested in the trades. It seems they are being directed toward white-collar or tech jobs, which is unfortunate. I figured I'd add my 2 cents. I'm a regular listener to the podcast and a subscriber to the magazine and website. Thanks for all the content and information. Well, thanks for that, Jason. You want to be on Pro Talk? If you're listening.
I think he makes such a valid point. And I think when you're given the opportunities that come with those trainings, it makes you a more loyal employee. I feel like, people generally thrive when they're encouraged to and given the resources to grow professionally. So it's an investment from the employer standpoint.
Right.
Especially somebody who is really green, because the first couple years, you are just a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And in the industry, there's not a lot of, when you think about it, when you're working for a big white collar company, there's all sorts of training they put you through. They, sometimes they sponsor, if you're taking classes, college courses and those sorts of things, but that just doesn't exist in the trades, really.
I disagree. I mean, there's less of it, but like in the union, I would definitely say the training is very good from what I've heard.
Okay.
Let's see.
You might have to seek that out yourself, though.
What, me? Going to the union?
No, just generally speaking, versus having an employer present you with opportunities versus you having to do all the legwork to look for those opportunities.
Oh, agreed.
Right.
I think there's something to be said for making some noise that you want training as a young tradesperson, right? Or even someone who's having a second career. If you show an interest in bettering yourself, I'm betting folks are going to be more willing to help you. This is from Evan. Dear FHB podcast crew, in a recent episode you discussed paint and the reflection of light by various materials. You asked what happens when light is reflected from a building. I'm a student of Appalachian State University in building science and physics. My understanding of the situation is that building is hit with light, and the color that you see is the color that the siding or any other material reflects the most of. Other wavelengths of light are absorbed, which does to an extent influence the temperature increase of the building. Black surfaces absorb the most light and white surfaces reflect the most light, with a spectrum in between the two. The amount of light not absorbed is called albedo, something you may have heard before. Some light reflected from the building would reach nearby buildings, as you all suspected. The amount of light coming to them depends on the color of the first building. Other portions of the light will reach the ground, air, or leave the atmosphere. This can continue for a given beam of photons, light particles, until it is completely absorbed or exits the atmosphere. Just as with a building or individual object, the planet as a whole has an albedo, as not all light received is absorbed on Earth. Thanks, Evan. Boy, Evan, he's elevating us to a new level, I think.
Have you ever heard the term albedo? I had to look, or the word albedo. Have you heard that? I had to look it up. So it's an astronomy term. Meaning the proportion of the incident light or radiation that is reflected by a surface, typically that of a planet or moon. I thought that was interesting. I'm a word nerd, though.
Yeah, I did understand how light works, where you're seeing, you're basically, it's absorbing. I get how the color thing works. I remember that conversation that we were having. We were kind of wondering, and after we all admitted how terrible we did in physics courses.
Of course, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, we were just kind of wondering where it went. After it reflects, does it just go out into the cosmos or does it heat up the atmosphere on the way? Or
now we know it's both, right?
Right.
That's pretty great. Thanks, Evan. We're so lucky to have smart people who listen to this show. I'm curious what they get out of it. Anyway, this is from Chris. I just finished listening to podcast 406 where Kylie was talking about trying to fix her sand point well, which I also have never heard of. Coincidentally, I was just checking out a house my brother is having inspected for a possible purchase a couple of towns over from Kylie, which has a standard well as lead in the soil around the house due to power washing lead paint from it without any concern for collecting it. I asked the guys inspecting the well, which was about 50 feet from the house, to add lead to the water test just to be safe, and I'm still waiting on those results, which we're hoping will come back clean. Being that Kylie's house is old and the well abuts the foundation and is shallow, I would think the concern for possible lead contamination would be far greater than in a standard well, which is deeper and farther from a dwelling. I hope that all is well with the well, Kylie. That's
Oh my
Chris.
God. You know, Mike Gerton sent me a number of emails in response to my call out.
Oh my God, tell us what he said.
Yeah. So, oh my God, this well situation is just it's going to be the death of me. I'll tell you that. So Mike has installed 2 Sandpoint wells to service houses. He made some interesting recommendations, one of which was for me to do a little legwork and go to some tractor supply companies and see if there were any people. He mentioned that farmers typically put in this type of well to irrigate their land, and that Tractor Supply sells what you need to put these wells in, and that it might be worth doing a little legwork to figure out if there's somebody in the area who knows how to do it. However, and then he sent me a whole kind of step-by-step instruction as to how to do it. So I found somebody willing to do it, and I know where to get the supplies. But this email, I actually got a lot of feedback about contamination, and Patrick made a comment along those lines, and I got really nervous about it. So here's my predicament. I also investigated a proper drilled well.
Yeah.
Now, my property doesn't have a lot of options in terms of that because of the septic system and the river, and there's so many issues. And I had somebody come and give me a quote, not a quote exactly. He told me what would be involved, and he said I was looking at a year out at least in terms of getting a variance. So the health department needs to be involved in that, and it's a very long process. So I'm not going to have water pressure anytime soon. And the Sandpoint well is making me nervous, even though it would be a whole lot cheaper. And Mike Gerton telling me that it's doable makes me feel like it's doable. But there's the contamination issue. So I need to get those permits rolling, and I need to test my water. Those are the 2 things that are the first steps. But mostly, I've decided that water pressure is a first world privilege, and I have learned how to cope without it.
Well, they say the secret to happiness is lower your expectations. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, what a complicated situation when Patrick, you live around here. It's these little seasonal cottages that are now year-round houses that are right
Kylie,
next to rivers.
It was
complicated.
Weeks, not months, before our house revealed its well problem.
Yeah, but things are different these days.
I mean, we had, to the tune of 10 grand, we had to drill a well because we had a dug well, in our basement with just not enough water.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Oh, man.
I grew up in a house with a Sandpoint, and it was yeah, yep, and it was the water table. The whole county was just pure sand, and I think those Sandpoints. Well, the name indicates it needs to be sandy. You can't pound one of those things
because you're using the aquifer as your reservoir, right?
And ours went down. Honestly, I think it was like 20 feet tops.
That's
so
what
the
mine
problem
is.
with that is our house was built in a farm field, so I think there was a lot of, which explains a lot nowadays. There was a lot of contaminants in our water growing up because that the farmers were fertilizing and if you have a deep well, a lot of these contaminants that come from the top of the soil they get filtered out on the way down.
Right.
So if it's really shallow, that doesn't happen. Although a deep well, it can pick up contaminants on the way down, but. This guy made a comment about lead. I took a lead certification, lead abatement certification program, and if you're in an inner ring suburb or in the city, if you find lead in your soil, it's not typically just because somebody pressure washed the house. What that's from is
gas.
Back in the day, gasoline, the leaded cars, and it's a real problem.
So the fact that my gravel parking spot, abuts the well is probably not a good situation.
No, not for a modern car. We don't burn lead anymore.
Yeah, but this house was built in 1930.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So people have been parking there for probably a very long time. Yeah.
You might want to switch to bottled water for drinking.
I know. Yeah, that's the very least I could do initially.
Yeah.
We had our water tested at our last place, and it had arsenic in it. We did kind of one of those fancy medical tests where they give you the whole blood sample, and they give you the whole workup. And My wife got hers back first, and she had high levels of arsenic in her system.
Oh my God!
And of course, she looked at me and I said, "I'm not trying to poison you. That's not me, I promise." And I'm not sure, and I don't think she believed me until I got mine back, and mine was high as well. So those water filters, we filtered. We had terrible well water, so we drank filtered water all the time. But the vast majority of those water filters you get,
it doesn't do squat. Yeah,
it doesn't do arsenic. It'll do almost everything else except arsenic.
It doesn't do lead, right? It's a different thing.
Probably not. Yeah, some of them. Yeah, it's hard, but you have to really look to see what you're. Just
we
don't
clearly
buy
need
a
water expert on Pro Talk, right, Mark, to talk about this stuff.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Like I said, this well situation is going to kill me one way or the other.
Yeah, drinking. It's amazing how important water is in our lives.
Yes, it is.
Our question comes from Tom. Hey, podcasters, homeowner here. I have a vinyl-sided house with woven Tenneco house wrap over 1 inch of XPS. Circa in 2000, the house was built in 1982 in Long Island, New York. Project is to put 3 inches of polyiso on the interior poured concrete foundation in the basement and crawl space. The basement is damp except for the heating season here. My dehumidifier runs all summer, bringing humidity down to 70%. Winter is 40% with no dehumidifier. My concern is the rim joist above. Since the exterior has 1 inch of foam already, I worry about locking in moisture with polyiso and foam sealing gaps or using closed cell foam. Currently, my rim joists are fiberglass insulated. Plan B was to stuff in rock wool. I read through Martin Holliday's and Joe Steebrook's info, and no mention of my situation of exterior XPS insulation in place is discussed. Pictures may help. Contact with me with any questions. Well, I didn't do that, so we're just going to have to go with what we got. So this is a legitimate concern, Tom. Folks that I know who are in the weatherization business often don't even touch the band joist on masonry buildings because of solar vapor drive, right? If you got a brick reservoir cladding or stucco or something that's holding all the moisture, as sun hits it, it's going to drive that moisture into your band joist and potentially rot it out. So they kind of just like decide not to mess with it in terms of preserving the house. And I think that's a legitimate approach for sure. Certainly the least risky.
When
3 inches, that's a lot of insulation too for a basement and crawl space in all but crazy cold places.
When the builder, I was a siding contractor, and I worked for a big builder that built many houses, hundreds of houses. And part of the deal was once a month, we'd go around and address issues that people are having. The roof or the side or the framer, we'd all kind of go from house to house to where people are having issues. And one of the things, the way they were building the houses back then was it was just vinyl siding. It was a pretty low perm rated house wrap. And then the joist space, the joist cavities, they just shoved insulation, fiberglass in there. And the sheathing was like a fiberboard. And in those places that had high humidity in the winter, that fiberboard was just like, you'd pull back that insulation and you could scoop that stuff out like oatmeal. It was just rotten.
Man, that's scary.
So what they started doing, they started spraying those band joists with, closed cell, and then they switched to Tyvek, which has a much higher perm rating than other.
So they'd put
house
Tyvek
wraps.
over a fibrous insulation? Is that what you're saying?
They put they got rid of. They stopped doing well, and the code actually stopped them from insulating the band joists or the joist cavities with fiberglass. So once they stopped doing that and moved to a higher perm rating house wrap, that solved the problem. But this is case, I always wondered. I've thought about this. What he's talking about. He's basically sandwiching the sheathing between two pieces of foam. Correct?
Or the foam is the sheathing on the exterior. I'm not sure if there's a sheathing layer behind it.
But if moisture can't travel through in either direction, I mean, the center of that sandwich should be fine, right?
If your air sealing details are impeccable, and I think you'd agree that's not often the case.
Sure.
I don't know. So I think sealing the gaps and cracks where the air gets in is more important than insulating this space, right? Kylie, this is what we were talking about in your house.
Yeah.
You want to seal the cracks where the air's getting in, and the band joist is one of those notoriously leaky spots. But do you have to stuff insulation in there or spray it with closed cell? I don't think so, and I think it definitely is a higher risk especially for, like I said, houses with reservoir claddings.
That seems like those are always seemingly
In fibrous
suffering.
insulation, rock wool was plan B. They don't work really good without air sealing as, some other means. So once again, you'd want to caulk the gaps and stuff around the band joist and the mud sill. And then if you do a good job of that and put rock wool in, it'll likely help.
I feel like, I know that we've discussed this before, but I just feel like this band joist versus rim joist. Can you guys please finalize and make clear the difference? Because I can't seem to get my head around it.
I think they're used interchangeably for
I do
the
too.
same thing.
I would agree. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Their origin might be different, but at least currently they're used interchangeably. What do you prefer, Kylie?
I always say rim joist, and then when I see band joist, I get thrown off.
How about you, Mark? You got a favorite?
I don't. I probably mix them up on a regular basis.
Jeff, do you
Variety.
have a favorite term?
I can't say that I do. No.
What do you say, Patrick?
I don't know, honestly. Do you know what I say? Anyone
I
who's paid
don't
attention?
know. Anyway, boy, that
anyway.
seems to be a constant problem, that area, for 100 different reasons.
Tom, I would, really consider putting less insulation there because, boy, at least the 3rd inch seems like a lot. 1, 2 seems pretty customary, but 3, that's hardcore.
For a while, we were, builders in our area were putting an insulated, like a SIP, instead of a solid wood rim joist, band joist.
Oh, cool.
So, it was cool until people started hanging decks off of it. So they were screwing into this thing thinking it was solid, and they were hitting 2 half-inch pieces of plywood, and it was a disaster.
Oh, boy.
Oh, man.
Matt
Yeah.
would have a field day with that. He loves talking about decks that fail.
I talked to him for an hour last Sunday, which was supremely enjoyable. And he at least tentatively agreed to be on Pro Talk to tell us about his
cool.
transition from being Fine Homebuilding editor to being carpenter on the spot. So
It sounds to me, I saw him recently, and he's doing a lot of fixing up of other people's ups.
if you're a good, smart builder,
It's frustrating.
working for other people, yeah, sometimes you have to fix stuff. This comes from JP. Hello, FHB podcast. Like many tradespeople, I come across a lot of salvageable building material in my work. Dumpsters are often teeming with potentially useful stuff for a future build or improvements to my house or family members. But you can't save everything, and building stuff often takes up a lot of space. How do you decide what to save and what to let go? Do you ask your coworkers or other tradespeople to keep an eye out for stuff that you're looking for? Do you rescue stuff for other people? What are some of the things you brought home? Did you use this stuff, or did you just end up storing it for months or years only to throw it out later? Anyhow.
I think it kind of depends how much space you have. But I at my last place, I did have I had plenty of space. I had an outdoor, a 20 by 60, I had a 30 by 60 shop, and I had a 20 by 60 cold storage. And the cold storage I got really lucky on because I had an old dilapidated building that got crushed by a tree, and the insurance company surprisingly paid me to build a brand new one, so that worked out really well. But we would have trim, if you pre-finish trim, they don't take it back. So I had a bunch of that. We if you had a 3/4, from a roofing job, maybe they needed 6 feet out of a ice and water barrier, we'd have all sorts of stuff like that. But it's really how much.
What?
The key is 3 things. You need the space. Second, you need to have it organized so you can actually know what you have and where it is. And then you have to remember that you do have it. Because a lot of times, you do, it's like, oh, that's right, we just did a roof and I forgot to bring all those 4 partial rolls out there. So,
Mark, why
yeah,
is pre-treated trim a problem?
Because
They
you
just won't take
painted
it.
it.
Yeah, they won't take it back.
So?
Just because it's they consider it a custom order at that point. So
No,
Yeah.
I thought you meant just in terms of like collecting. I guess you're right. The color is not going to match.
yeah, no.
Likely.
So, but you'll find a job where when I moved, I had to get rid of a lot of that stuff. I gave it away, put it out on the side of the road, and it's amazing how much stuff people took.
Now, I have a question about this. What if you collect stuff and you bring it to an architectural salvage, place that sells that stuff? Do you make money on that, or you just drop it off? Or are you just doing them a favor?
I've shopped there, but I've never dropped things off there.
Yeah,
But yeah,
me
that's
too.
a great
I mean,
option.
I don't
How about
know.
you,
That's a
Patrick?
good question.
Have you
I'm
done
sure they
that?
pay you something. Is it fair? It's hard to say.
yeah, is it worth it?
Jeff, I know you are a huge fan of salvaging stuff. What's your take on this?
Well, I mean, I'm by nature a string saver, so
I never heard that expression. That's
I love that
fantastic.
expression. Yeah.
but I just it's a matter of storage and knowing what you've got, and then eventually finding a use for it. I have stuff that I keep for literally decades and still haven't found a use for, but I can't get rid of it. So my wife.
This would be a good question for Rob Watzak, right?
Yeah, I mean, my mom was notorious for, there's a 2x4 on the side of the road.
That's awesome.
So one of my first remodeling gigs when I was briefly an entrepreneur in the home improvement business was replacing casing for a client. And they had this typical 2.5-inch ranch casing that is from, homes from the 50s and 60s. And they pulled all this stuff off and put something nicer in its place. Well, I took all this junky casing back home with me. I was living at my parents' house at the time, and I spent hours stripping it in their garage with a heat gun. And then I piled all that stuff up in my in the attic of the garage on the ceiling joists, and I think it's still there.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to be careful too with if it's something like where you got to pull a bunch of nails, or time is money as well. Yeah. So there's a balance there. You can't just collect everything.
Another
Sometimes
time, we demoed a structure completely for Pittsburgh Habitat for Humanity, and we had these 16 or 18 foot 2x10 joists, and they were in decent shape. And I scavenged those and stored them for a while. And then we moved, my then girlfriend, now wife Carol, and I moved to Vermont. And her poor uncle who helped us move had to take those freaking 2x10 joists back to Vermont. And then they sat in his wife's parents' garage for decades until then they had to throw them out when they took over the house. So I have a strong, proud history of ditching my used building materials on other people.
Do you know what I've been collecting?
Oh, go ahead, Kylie.
From the office at Taunton, because nobody's there except for me.
Oh, you're the one stealing all the stuff.
I'm stealing stuff, yeah. I've been stealing, I have a really crummy old vinyl floor in my bathroom, and I'm not doing this in any kind of professional way, but I have been I don't know if I should admit this, but I've been taking these beautiful pieces of blue slate, and covering up my floor with them, and it has really improved the aesthetic of my bathroom. I mean, I didn't rip up the vinyl, I didn't do it right, but hey, it's an improvement, and that I enjoy, and it was just all sitting there, so.
I know where you can get some casing
win-win.
if you want to replace it.
And some 2x10s.
This is a question that was sponsored by a post in my my Facebook feed, and this is how it's worded. What are some serious design blunders you guys have seen? What do you think people get wrong consistently? I routinely see weird window arrangements, details with bad proportions, and overly complicated exteriors. I love this question because you see it more now than ever, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
It's
new construction.
gotten worse, not better.
Yeah.
I have a resource for this reader that he's going to enjoy, he or she, I'm not sure what the person's name is going to enjoy so much. Have you all visited Kate Wagner's website, McMansion Hell?
Yeah, super fun.
Oh, it's so much fun. And you learn a lot. It's very informative. I would like to jump in here and say I think that based on just personal experience and reading her site, that a mashup of architectural styles is a big one that you see.
Yep.
Just styles that are at odds with one another. You can't even determine what it is the house is supposed to be. Garages that are the same size or bigger than the main house is awful.
Oh yeah, Carol and I call that the 3-car garage with a attached dwelling.
Yeah. I think weird intersections of walls and roofs, the gargantuan sizes of McMansions, weirdly placed Palladian windows, which I feel like, they look like an afterthought. Like,
they go good anywhere, Kylie. What are you talking about?
Especially on the side of a Palladian window on the side of a house. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. And this is one of my personal pet peeves, like massive tacked on screened porches with raised concrete foundations that eat up the entire front elevation. That just makes me cringe. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. I love floating fireplace chimney chases. That is a favorite of mine. You know what I'm talking about? So it's a wood chase around a steel chimney, and it just hanging there.
Yep. Yeah, the kind of the mishmash is I actually kind of go. You see a house and it's like, there's a gable. Let's put shakes in it. Oh, there's a right below that. Let's do board and batten, and let's do some some stone over here and brick. It's just a total mishmash. But
what did this person write too?
You're trying to make this person be a person.
What do you mean?
This is me. This is my seeded question. You ruined everything. It was supposed to be so spontaneous.
So on the other hand, people can do what they want. I mean, it's their house. They can do what they want to it. And
but we all have to live with looking at it.
Right. I would have customers that would be so their driving force would be resale. And more interior design rather than exterior. But it's like how, just do the way are you going to live here? I mean, we're going to live here for 20 years. So what do you care about resale? Just do it. If you're living it for 20 years, do it the way you want to do it.
Heathcliff hates it too, I can tell.
I know. If this gets too much, I'm going to need to take care of that situation in a minute, I can tell.
So
my friend put up this photograph on our Facebook page of this house in his area, which I'm not going to say where that is because someone might track it down, but it has this porch, and the columns are not within the footprint of the porch roof. They're on little extensions with their own weird little hip roofs on top.
Yeah. It's like a Georgian style or federal style porches on a craftsman style couch, and they're just kind of laying.
Oh my goodness, it is so hideous. I've never seen anything so horrible.
I think it was mentioned in the question the idea of really complicated. It said exteriors, but roof lines, really complex.
Yeah.
Hips and
Yep.
dormers and just
the house I'm building is three rectangles connected. It's as simple as it gets.
But
designing this thing was
simple as beautiful.
Yep. I mean, they're 12-12, but designing this house was weird because I actually started with kind of I'm looking for kind of a modern colonial. So they're just big windows on the front, and they're all organized. If you can imagine 5 across the top and 5, including the door and underneath, but. It was hard to design that way because you're really starting with the exterior and trying to make all the interior fit properly. It was not easy. So you
designed it, Mark?
A lot of. Yeah, I mean it's not. Cool. It's nothing. Like I said, it's 3 rectangles. But yeah,
Own it, man. You designed it.
Yeah.
Yep, I designed it, and I'm happy with most of it. But like I said, you have to make in every design you have to make compromises. One interior thing that drives me crazy, and I don't understand, and maybe you guys can correct me, but I don't understand these humongous bedrooms that are like gymnasiums. It's like, why would you need... My sister bought a McMansion, basically. It's a nice house, but her bedroom is literally 3 times bigger than it needs to be.
Right.
I mean, she could host an entire yoga class with 15 people in that bedroom. It's like,
if she does that, then there's a reason for it.
Right.
Makes sense.
It was reinforced to me when we went to go buy some new furniture for our 700 square foot house. Is you can't find commercially made pieces that will work in a little house. They are made to fit in these enormous spaces. You're buying furniture by the square foot.
Yep. They're really big. Living room furniture. They're really big and really puffy and really ginormous. And they look.
I was thinking about this question in the context of Carol and I were recently talking about some of the rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods that we used to know in Pittsburgh that were had fallen on hard times. But in the 20s and 30s, these were very expensive neighborhoods, right? These were the McMansions of their time, right? Mm-hmm. And they were beautiful, and they had amazing details. What the heck did we get so wrong in the last few decades?
I think part of it is, and part of it's not a bad thing in that those craftsmen that were working on those houses were getting paid very little
handsomely
compared to what. Yeah, I don't think so.
I
think you could build a house. Of course, it costs cheaper just with the difference in money, but I think it just costs a lot less to build a house then, so you could afford to have...
Oh, you're saying that they were just nice because it was cheap.
Right, yes, because you could hire a craftsman to do this and not have to, they could do it for cheap. And they could do it...
You just said they were being paid handsomely, though.
No, that was my mistake. I misinterpreted what Mark was saying.
Oh, okay.
Because I looked back at once, because you see these old houses like, oh, this thing costs, $10,000 to build 20 years ago, and I've done a couple comparisons, and it was still, it was still cheap. It was way cheap. It wasn't 30% of people's income. I mean, you could buy a decent house for cheap. I think they were cheaper to make, and so I think, and some of the nicer houses, a lot of this stuff was just pure status. So
you mean in this period of the roaring 20s and 30s?
Right.
Yeah.
And then how many people could own those houses? I mean, they were cheap, but still, there's just a lot of people weren't making a living wage back then.
Right.
Well,
that's the other thing that.
Go ahead.
Just cheap materials that are being used for production houses. I mean, that affects the design quality, aesthetic, whatever.
Sure does.
Well, folks listening, please send us your photos of bad houses, because I think it'll be a fun exercise to look at.
And for a good belly laugh, definitely check out
McMansion
Hell. That's such a fun site.
This comes from Scott. This is a long one, so bear with me, folks. Hey, folks, I posted a bit about our situation last year. We purchased a home in Chicago, which is a 1914 brick, 2-flat. We bought it from the builder who performed the gut rehab on it. Long story short, the interior insulation retrofit did all the things you shouldn't do according to building science, and has resulted in a significant amount of issues, including but not limited to spalling and accelerated degradation of both structure and finishes. We're not only concerned for the building, but also our health, as the assemblies are taking on a lot of moisture from both the interior and the exterior. Last winter, we opened up a few holes in the drywall to discover the interior face of the 3Y brick to be totally frozen over. For reference, the assembly from outside to in is 3Y brick, 2x4 wood frame offset slightly from the inside face of the brick, 3.5 inches of craft-faced bats, and then drywall. So this is exactly what you're not supposed to do. We've been considering two options for fixing this mess. The first being a proper interior insulation retrofit following Building Science Corporation's recommendation of spray foam, or 475 Building Supplies recommendation of Viscon liquid membrane, dense pack in 2x4 framing, and Intello smart vapor retarder. The hitch with this approach is having to uninstall all our finishes and completely demo back to the brick wall. The expense here would be significant. On top of this, we would have to still repair the exterior masonry, which we are getting quoted at about $60,000 to bring it up to standard quality. The second is an exterior insulation retrofit, where we'd like to follow Building Science Corp's deep dish literature. We liked a lot of things about this approach. It provides a continuous air-water thermal barrier on the exterior, transitions the brick wall to the interior, bringing it within the thermal boundary, thus allowing for its thermal mass to remain more constant to interior temperatures. It will protect our embedded structural wood members from thermal bridging and condensation risk. It will also give the opportunity to expose some brick on the interior too, which would be a nice aesthetic touch. Most of all, we would need to re-insulate, re-drywall, and repaint the entire interior of the building. Whew. Given that we would like to pursue the exterior insulation retrofit option, we shared the BSC article with our architect. The assembly from BSC is attached, but in short, fluidified air barrier to the brick, 2x4 vertical furring, rigid foam between and continuous over the framing, 1x4 furring on the exterior face of the last layer of rigid foam, and then siding. Our architect proposed installing all of the individual components instead of installing all the individual components to consider zip R sheathing instead. Instead of installing the liquid air barrier, furring, and rigid foam individually, integrate it all together into one product. Execution-wise, this makes sense to me. It will probably reduce labor costs as well. It does limit us to R12.5, which is a bit less than I originally wanted. So, any thoughts on Zip on this application? It never occurred to me to consider it. Any other thoughts or feedback would be welcomed. Thanks. Wow, Kylie, you want to building science this sucker?
Well, I will say that I recently wrote a story that will be in the next Fine Homebuilding issue, working with, he's now a passive house consultant designer, and he just actually it was 10 years ago, and he used best building science practices of the day back then, but he was telling me what he would do today. He was dealing with a commercial building. It used to be a warehouse for pickle barrels, and the construction was just almost exactly what this guy is talking about. It was the anyway, the walls,
brick, yeah.
Yeah, 3 wide brick with 2x4 framing and all of that. He now says that he would certainly do what 475 recommends, the foam-free approach of the liquid membrane, the dense pack 2x4 framing, and he said an Intello smart barrier or a smart vapor retarder. I would say, based on the conversation that I read, this is a GBA question, that the main considerations would be what you're going for air tightness goals, what your air tightness goals are. That some people made the point that there's tricky detailing where the zip terminates.
You mean
near grade, if you go
yep.
with the zip. Mm-hmm. And then the exposed perimeter band of the masonry near grade, although he's moving the brick to the interior. I'm not sure if that still applies. I can't quite picture it. But and then a rain screen for bulk water management. How is that getting incorporated? He doesn't mention what he's going to use. I don't think he mentioned what he's going to use for final, for the cladding. So that matters too. I certainly don't have the solution. Zip solves some of those issues in terms of simplicity of the material and the labor and all of that. But there's no rain screen there unless I guess you can fur it out and then add your cladding, but we don't know what the cladding is going to be. Anyway, what do you guys think?
Mark, I'm going to let you go because you dealt with this very subject yesterday, right?
I did. I just recorded a podcast with Bob Kelly, who's also from Chicago, and this is what he does. I mean, he's created a very niche market, and this is exactly what he does. And he would probably say, the name of his company is Wickrite, so it's Wickright. And more than likely, he would say, what's going on in the inside, it doesn't matter what you do on the inside, you got to dry that brick out first. So, and if you can do that, then your options are unlimited almost on the inside. So, and what he does is a couple things. If this is an old building, more than likely, because I asked him about that, why are most of the buildings he's working on are 20 years and newer that are just being destroyed because
are
these
they
masonry
commercial
units
buildings?
Or residential with, like 3-story apartments or even like brownstone, brick houses with flat roofs or even, so all of the above. But they're trapping all this water in the masonry units, and he basically came up with a system to allow that water to get out at the top. And the other thing, I asked him
in a simple way to describe it, it's a vented parapet, right, Mark? Isn't that
correct.
what it is?
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yep. And it's amazing how much water comes out of these things. And he's got a little video on his website where he takes a drill and he drills in between a mortar joint and probably 10 gallons of water pours out.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
As I understand it, these buildings are a problem both from the interior and the exterior. The parapet walls are poorly detailed and they get soaking wet, and then that moisture works through the masonry and ends up coming into the building because it's going to move from more to less, right?
Yep.
And behind this stud wall that someone put in this masonry building in Scott's instance is just filling with vapor constantly,
yep.
right? It's just moving and accumulating back there. It's the exact wrong thing to do.
And the reason this happens to old houses is because the mortar that they use. They're not in the old days. That lime mortar was very porous. It was like a little vent between every layer of brick, and this building has probably been retucked with a harder mortar that doesn't breathe. So there's probably some, I think he mention there's spalling, because when you see spalling brick, that's typically what happens. So.
And it's the other problem, and that's exacerbated by that masonry wall being colder because heat flow is being reduced from the inside. Right. When you have, this thing 70 degrees on the inside, it's drying that masonry. And but when you put insulation on the inside of these masonry structures, it definitely changes the profile of how vapor behaves.
But if that masonry structure can breathe properly, you're fine.
Yeah.
I mean, my advice would be to start there, and then I think that would open up your interior options. I don't think you would have to get that crazy with it if you could just keep that brick dry.
There are many people who would just shudder at the idea of covering up all that brick, right? There's that.
You mean on the exterior?
On the exterior, you're going to change the entire building.
Yeah. And I've seen them done very poorly. They look ugly,
Yeah.
Right.
It's a hard problem, and I'm sorry you bought this disaster, Scott.
Yeah. But Bob Kelly, look, check him out.
Yeah,
That's your
real answer is to contact Bob.
Somebody who does it, yeah.
And, this is a problem with remodeled masonry structures consistently. So if you're considering buying one of these things, make sure whoever did the conversion did it right.
You think people buy properties without knowing that there's a brick in the middle of their wall assembly?
I think they think it's improved, Kylie, because now it has insulation, and that's a selling point to someone who's uninformed, right? It's like, now this thing is not going to be an energy pig. It's going to be comfortable and more affordable to heat.
Yeah, they don't think about water.
Right.
We rebuilt an old 1860s house or something like that, and the interior wall cavities were brick. That was the insulation. It was stud walls, and in the town that it was in, there used to be a brick factory there. So somebody who worked at the factory was just bringing bricks home and used it as insulation between the interior
I've
cavity.
seen that before too.
Travis Brungard took me to
they were just stacked in there.
took me to one of his projects that had like sandstone masonry in the stud cavities, just like piled in there. And the folks theorized it was for sound attenuation, and that makes a lot of sense because if you put this high mass material in there, it might help. But oh my gosh, can you imagine how much work that was?
Do you think this idea that he mentioned about thermal mass and keeping the interior
good idea
temperature, it is a good idea? You think that's effective? It works just as he says? If
you can put the insulation layer on the exterior, assuming the aesthetic compromise, that is probably better for the building, right?
Yeah, but I'm asking if the brick on the being sandwiched in the middle of the wall is going to work as a thermal mass to regulate the interior temperature. That's what he's suggesting, and I just wonder if that's true.
Well, it is definitely thermal mass. Sometimes that helps you, sometimes it doesn't. That's all I can say about that. Speaking of Travis Brungard.
Did we? Oh, yeah, you did.
What?
I didn't remember you mentioned him.
I think I did.
Yeah, you did.
'Twas a month before this. So Travis wrote this and sent it to us. 'Twas a month before Christmas, and all through my life, there's no project completion, just turmoil and strife. The subs were all scheduled, and so were the parts. But pandemic time schedules are more like throwing darts. Suppliers can't say when their goods will arrive. If subs show it's 2, not the usual 5. With less crew on the work, the delays they do mount. Being frustrated client email, too many to count. Their projects run long and cost more but aren't better. These extended durations make us the upsetter. Now what to my sleep-deprived eyes did appear? But more new housing starts and remodels next year. Our materials pricey, our trade partners more so. But with timelines so lengthy, our profits, they no show. Seasons once filled with joy are now full of sorry, but there's no end in sight for next year, so I worry. I don't know about the last line of Travis, but that's pretty good.
You're supposed to say sorry. You're supposed to say sorry.
Right, Canadian. Yeah, sorry. Oh, Travis, you're such a lovable nut.
That's fun, right?
It is fun.
I got big news, and Colin spilled the beans a couple weeks ago, but I'm going to remind you all, Wednesday, January 12th from 9 to 6:30, we are having our first ever Pro Talk live event in Portland, Oregon. And I spelled it phonetically so you folks wouldn't make fun of me for saying Oregon. We're going to have TED Talk-like presentations by 4 smart people. Tim Mueller of Pioneer Builders will present Work Smarter, Not Harder, how to frame houses with efficiency so you can have a long career too. Brian Mueller of Pioneer Builders has a presentation building better spec homes 4 decades in the making. So their company started selling spec houses in 1978. I don't know if they started selling specs in 78, but their father started the company in 1978. And pretty much what they do is build and sell spec homes as their business model. And they have learned a lot along the way, and they're going to share that with our folks. Not finally, but Josh Salinger of Bird's Mouth Design Build is going to present on good intentions and disastrous results, how not to do an energy retrofit, which sounds supremely entertaining. And then finally, Lindsay Shack of Love Shack Architecture will be presenting delivering beautiful and nurturing spaces for clients. So I think you'd agree that there is something for everybody. And if that is not enticement enough, it's being held at Red on Salmon, which is this amazing event space. And if you're curious, go to redonsalmon.com to check it out. And gosh, I hope we'll see you all there. Please, 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 please come to Pro Talk Live.
And where do they buy tickets, Patrick?
Oh,
What's the website link?
Yeah, let me get that.
That's a great lineup, by the way. That is impressive.
Yeah. Love Shack, I know their work. They do beautiful stuff. They're in Seattle, right?
Yes. What do you know about them, Kylie?
Well, there's what I remember most is that the firm is owned by Lindsay Love and Lindsay Shack, hence Love Shack, which I thought was clever.
And it's SCH.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've written about them before, or we've featured their work before.
Yeah, I'm super excited about everyone who's presenting.
Are you the moderator? How's that working?
I am the host. Yeah.
Cool.
Jeff, can you look up that website? I can't find it right now. We'll put it on the podcast page.
We'll put it on
the
finehomebuilding.com will get you there, I
notes.
promise. Pro Talk Live. Anyway. Did you guys check out that venue? It's amazing.
Yeah, cool.
How would you describe it, Kylie?
I haven't looked at it yet. I didn't look at it. This is all news to me.
You didn't know about Pro Talk Live?
That's all I knew. There was an event happening, but I didn't know the details.
Once again, it's January 12th, 9 to 6:30. It is not free, I might say, but it is worth your time and effort. I'm going to say that for sure because
What do the tickets cost?
I think they're $150.
I bet
Worth
you
the
Malcolm
price of
Taylor will
admission.
be there. I'll share it with him. He's an architect in, I think it's Oregon.
I hope everybody who's listening is there. It'll be awesome. Well, sorry for the dead air, folks. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Jeff, Kylie, and Mark for joining me, and thanks all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, feedback, suggestions, whatever you got, bad architecture examples, and please review, comment, or share us no matter how you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. It is always a pleasure sharing this hour with you, everybody. Thanks very much for listening. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Do you know that website, Jeff?
No.
We are amateurs. We're such amateurs.
We absolutely have to be sure to put it in the show notes then.
Bye, everybody.